Michelle Obama goes to Princeton for free.
Yeah.
And has been in the ruling class her whole life.
Yeah.
And she's still lecturing you about how she's a victim of racism. Hillary Clinton, exact same thing. Goes to Wellesley, spends her entire life in the ruling class, and she's still whining about how she's discriminated against. Why are they doing that?
Yeah, and did you ever see, they'll have like pictures of, side by side, but it'll be like pictures of like Jimmy Carter's house and Obama's house.
Exactly.
And it totally represents something about the like corroding of our soul.
In a white neighborhood, you should be required to live in the hood if you're Barack Obama and
if you're using that card.
You use that card. The only reason you got elected was because of your race. You spent your entire 8 years inflaming race hate in our country, and then you go to Martha's Vineyard, the whitest zip code in the world? Not allowed.
Tucker Carlson struggled to hide his shock when a bombshell revelation about former President Barack Obama was exposed live on air. The tension in the studio was palpable as Carlson's guest, a well-connected insider, dropped a truth bomb that sent shockwaves throughout the political world. The moment the guest's words left his mouth, the entire atmosphere shifted, and Carlson's expression quickly transformed from controlled skepticism to sheer disbelief. The audience, both in the studio and at home, could sense that this wasn't just another typical political scandal. This was something far deeper, something the mainstream media had worked tirelessly to keep hidden from the public. It all began when Carlson introduced his guest, a former Washington insider with unparalleled first-hand knowledge of Obama's past dealings. What followed was an explosive recount of backdoor politics and strategic image crafting. As the guest spoke, a dark and unsettling picture of the Obama administration began to emerge. This wasn't just a case of political missteps or some average corruption story. It was the story of a carefully constructed narrative that obscured the truth and hid an ugly reality. The more Carlson heard, the more he realized that what was being exposed went far beyond one politician's misdeeds. It had the potential to shake the foundation of American politics itself. The revelation would soon become the focal point of intense political discourse and widespread outrage, setting the stage for a new wave of investigations and calls for accountability. And it all began with that one explosive moment on live television.
In retrospect, it's pretty amazing that Barack Obama got as far as he did. In 2004, the summer of 2004, Barack Obama gave the keynote address at the Democratic Convention in Boston. And when he walked to the podium, probably only a small percentage of people in the room knew how to pronounce his name. He was totally unheard of. No one knew Barack Obama. At the time, he was a state senator in Illinois. 4 years later, he once again spoke to the Democratic Convention, but this time as the nominee. Meteoric doesn't begin to describe it. How did this happen? Well, the outlines are fairly well known, though rarely talked about. A small group of Democratic donors, mostly in Chicago, decided that Barack Obama was their guy. He was the vessel for their ambitions. They paid for his campaign. They paved the way for his rise. He spent 2 years pointlessly in the United States Senate preparing to run for president in 2008, and of course, in the end, he won.
The guest, whose credentials were unimpeachable and whose insight into the workings of Washington was second to none, sat upright. His voice steady but carrying an urgency that couldn't be ignored. "There's something about Barack Obama that the media doesn't want you to know," he began. His voice laced with a sense of frustration. "They've spent years covering it up, but the truth always has a way of coming out." Carlson's expression sharpened. His interest peaked as he leaned forward. He locked eyes with the guest, silently urging him to continue. The guest wasted no time, diving into a story so meticulously hidden that even Carlson, a veteran in uncovering political corruption, looked visibly disturbed. According to the guest, Obama's rise to power wasn't just the result of his charisma or political savvy. No, it was the product of a network of powerful figures in Washington who worked tirelessly to craft a carefully curated public image for him, one that concealed his true intentions and actions. This wasn't a case of simple political maneuvering or strategy. It was deceit on an unprecedented scale. Carlson, clearly taken aback, interrupted. "Are you telling me that the media knew about all of this and chose to bury it?" he asked, his voice filled with incredulity. The guest nodded gravely, his words cutting through the tension in the room. "Absolutely. And it wasn't just the media. There were powerful figures in Washington. Billionaires, foreign interests, even business elites. All of them with a vested interest in keeping this under wraps. As the guest began to unravel the shocking truth, he detailed how the Obama administration had allegedly engaged in under-the-table deals, prioritizing personal interests over national concerns while masking it all with a public image of hope and transparency. There were claims of collusion with foreign elites, suspicious financial dealings, and covert conversations that never made it to the history books. This was a story of backroom power plays and hidden alliances, the kind of thing that, if true, would alter the public's perception of one of the most influential figures in modern American politics.
It was by accident. I was in the Chicago area in '99 for Lee Duke's graduation from the Naval Academy.
Who's Lee Duke?
He's basically my godson.
Okay.
I had hired a limousine service.
I'm sorry to interrupt. Did you live in Chicago then?
No, I was actually living in Colorado. I had flown in the night before.
Okay.
So, had hired a limousine service, had made the driver aware that if Lee couldn't leave the base, because once they graduate, some of them actually get their assignments and they're shipping out and they can't leave the base, that I was still interested in going out. And had asked the driver if he knew anybody that was available that might want to show me, Chicago. And he said he did. So
who was the driver?
His name was Jameer Multani. It was with 5-star limo.
So you're just a guy who's in town for the night, and it sounds like you're looking to party, actually.
Yeah.
That's what you're really saying.
Yeah. Well, I was in town for a few nights, but yeah, I was definitely looking to party. And
did you make that clear to the driver?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. There was no misunderstanding.
How direct were you about that?
Extremely.
Extremely.
Okay. Yeah. There was no doubt what I was looking for.
Okay.
And he picked me up at my hotel in Gurnee and drove into Chicago, pulled up in a bar outside, and there's this guy that's introduced to me as Barack Obama. It was literally that casual.
Had you ever heard of him?
No.
Did the driver know him?
Yep. The driver definitely knew him because the driver said that he was a friend.
Interesting. How would the driver be friends with Barack Obama?
I only found out later, dealing with a reporter from Bloomberg News, that apparently the limousine company had been doing business with Tony Resco, that at the time was somehow affiliated with Barack Obama.
Orbit. Yeah. Yes. Interesting. So he knew Barack Obama, and in his view, Barack Obama liked the same kind of partying you were looking for.
Yep.
As the full magnitude of the revelation sank in, Carlson's disgust became more pronounced. He shook his head in disbelief, finally breaking the silence with a voice thick with incredulity. This isn't just corruption. This is deception on a scale we've never seen before, he said. His face a mixture of anger and disbelief. But the guest wasn't finished. He had one more bombshell to drop. He revealed a piece of information so damning, so explosive, that Carlson, usually so composed and quick-witted, was left momentarily speechless. The studio fell into a stunned silence, the weight of the moment hanging heavy in the air. Carlson, looking visibly shaken, sat back in his chair. The gravity of what he had just heard was overwhelming, and it was clear that this was more than just political gossip. This was a systemic problem that reached into the heart of American power. When Carlson finally spoke, his voice was low and controlled, but filled with anger and disbelief. "Are you telling me," he asked, his tone now edged with fury, "that not a single journalist in the mainstream media ever thought to question this? Not one." The guest shook his head solemnly. Questioning it would have meant professional suicide. The few who tried were quickly silenced. The truth was too dangerous to reveal. Carlson's expression hardened. His eyes narrowed. "If what you're saying is true," he continued, "then America has been sold a false narrative, a presidency built on a web of lies and deceit." The implications of the guest's revelations were staggering, and the audience could feel the weight of it all. If the allegations held any truth, It meant that Obama's carefully constructed public image was not just misleading, it was a well-orchestrated illusion designed to keep the public in the dark. As the segment concluded, social media erupted. Hashtags demanding investigations into Obama began to trend instantly. Viewers flooded the comment sections, expressing a mixture of shock, anger, and disbelief. Many felt betrayed, as if they had been living in a carefully curated fantasy for years. Carlson, now visibly determined, vowed to keep digging. "This is just the beginning," he said, his voice unwavering. "If this is the truth, then the American people deserve to know every last detail. And I will make sure they do." The quest for accountability had only just begun.